I think it's time he met his real father." That sentence hit harder than any foul ball to the ribs. It landed soft, like she was offering to pass the butter, but it detonated something in my chest that I still can't name. We were sitting at our usual Sunday brunch spot, Mara, Ryan, and me, on the patio of that pretentious cafe she liked because the napkins were cloth and the coffee came in minimalist cups with no handles. Ryan was halfway through a tower of lemon ricotta pancakes, earbuds in one ear, scrolling through something on his phone. 15 years old, moody, with a shoulder twitch he picked up from baseball drills I taught him when he was 10. He used to practice swing mechanics with me in the garage until it got dark. And now I was just the guy who paid the mortgage. "I'm sorry," I asked, but not because I didn't hear her. I just wanted to believe I hadn't. Mara didn't even look up. She buttered her toast with that deliberate calm she used when she was about to tell me we were trying something new with the budget. "He's been asking." "It's natural, Mark. He's curious. I think it's time." That's when the blood in my body slowed. "I thought I was his father," I said. "You were." Not even a pause. "But now, he wants to know where he really comes from." And just like that, 15 years of school pickups, cleat tying, late-night fever runs, college saving plans, and being the one man Ryan could count on, all condensed into a polite obituary. "You were." There was no affair, no big fight, no warning, just a subtle rebranding of my identity, served over Eggs Benedict. I looked at Ryan. He didn't even flinch, didn't hear us. Or maybe he did and pretended he didn't, which somehow cut deeper. I didn't make a scene. I didn't demand answers. I didn't flip the table or storm out like a bad soap opera. That would have made it too easy for Mara. She would have turned me into the angry stepdad. No, I just sat there and finished my black coffee. It tasted like wet coins. That night, I packed. No dramatic speeches. No calls to friends. I left my wallet, my house keys, even my Apple Watch on the nightstand. I left a single handwritten note on the kitchen counter. "Don't look for me. You won't like what you find." I could still hear the ceiling fan creaking above me as I zipped up my duffel. The fan I installed myself. Like everything in that house, shelving, fire pit, the damn herb garden I never cared about, but she insisted on, we built it together. Or at least I thought we did. Before I walked out, I paused in the hallway, outside Ryan's room. The door was slightly cracked. He was on his Xbox, yelling into the mic, calling someone a bot. I remembered when that room was painted with stars, when I used to read to him from that dog-eared copy of Where the Red Fern Grows. He used to ask me what loyalty meant. I guess now he knows. I didn't say goodbye. I just turned and left. By the time I crossed the Oregon border and hit the empty stretch near Boise, I realized something strange. I wasn't crying. I wasn't yelling or muttering to myself like in the movies. I was just hollow, clean, like a whiteboard wiped down with one of those squeaky felt erasers. They thought I'd linger. They thought I'd fight to stay in their lives like a dog scratching at a locked door. But they'd forgotten something. I taught that boy how to hold his ground on the pitcher's mound. I taught him to shut out noise. And now I was doing exactly that. I drove in silence. 14 hours of interstate, winding roads, switchbacks, and memories clawing at the back of my skull like rats in a burlap sack. The cabin sat in northern Colorado, near a town so small the gas station doubled as the post office. I'd inherited it from my Uncle Walt after his heart gave out on a deer trail. I'd only been here once before, 15 years ago, when Ryan was a toddler. Mara hated the smell of firewood and the lack of Wi-Fi. Said it gave her migraines. Perfect. When I pulled up the gravel path, the place looked like it hadn't exhaled since Walt died. Shutters hanging loose like drunk arms, chimney half collapsed, snow crusted along the eaves like it had made a home there. I parked the truck, killed the engine, and just sat, listening. For what, I don't know. Maybe for the last part of myself snapping off. The front door didn't creak. It groaned like it knew I wasn't leaving this time. I didn't unpack right away. I walked around first, fingers brushing the scarred bark of the trees, boots sinking into the crunchy, frost-bitten grass. The air smelled like pine, rot, and mercy. The next morning, I started working. Not because I had to, but because I needed to. Splitting logs by hand became my therapy. The rhythmic thunk of the axe biting through wood cleared something in my chest. I rebuilt the generator from Walt's old schematics in the tool shed. The roof leaked, so I patched it. The floorboards creaked, so I nailed them down. Every fix was a sentence I never got to say. I burned the note Mara left in her letter tray from 2 Christmases ago. Let's make this year about gratitude. I found it wedged behind the bread box when I cleaned out my bag of old receipts. The irony made me laugh, sharp and bitter. There was no phone signal unless you stood barefoot on the metal roof during a thunderstorm. I tried it once. Just once. Nothing. And good. Let them wonder. Let them pace around that silent house I paid for, checking the driveway, expecting my truck to come back. Let them think. I kept a journal, not to write about them, but to remember how to talk to myself. I made a list, things I taught Ryan. It filled 2 pages. How to bunt. How to check tire pressure. How to shake a man's hand like you mean it. How to apologize without excuses. How to leave quietly. Most nights I sat by the fire with a tin of beans and a bottle of wild turkey Walt left behind. I'd sip, stare at the flames, and feel the numbness settle deeper. Not the bad kind. The kind that finally let your jaw unclench. I found one of Ryan's old drawings in my wallet. He was 6. It was stick figures, me, him, and a weirdly triangular dog. Underneath, he'd written my hero. I stared at that drawing for an hour, then folded it in half and slid it under a floorboard beneath the bed. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I never wanted to find it by accident. People think revenge is loud, rage-filled, explosive. Mine was quiet. It looked like a man fixing a roof alone in the Rockies, while the world forgot what he meant. And that's what made it so sharp. I wasn't hiding. I was erasing myself. Intentionally. And every log I split, every screw I drove into the siding, every breath I took in that bitter air whispered the same thing. You had me. You lost me. You'll never find me again. The first time he called, Ryan was beaming. Not in that goofy kid way, either. No, this was teenage bravado trying to mask something raw underneath. Hope, probably. Or desperation dressed up as finally. He said he wants to see me, Ryan told Mara as he scraped leftover Alfredo into the sink. Wants to come out next weekend. Mara smiled too quickly. That's great, sweetie. Really great. She went upstairs that night and cried in the bathroom with the water running, like Ryan wouldn't hear. Plans were made. Steak night. His favorite root beer. Ryan even cleaned out the garage, muttering that maybe they could work on the old motorcycle together. He used to ride, right? Mara nodded. She didn't mention that the last time Ryan's biological father touched a wrench, it was to pawn a socket set. She also didn't mention how many times she'd paid his rent under the table, or that the only consistent thing about him was his inconsistency. Friday came. Ryan waited on the porch for 3 hours. No text. No call. Nothing. At 9:07 p.m., Mara got a message that just read, "Sorry. Work stuff. Rain check." Ryan didn't say a word. Just stood up, went inside, and microwaved leftover chicken nuggets. When she asked if he wanted to talk about it, he replied with a blank, "He's busy." It's fine. But it wasn't. You could see the shift, small, almost surgical. He started checking his phone every 5 minutes. Every buzz, every ding. By Monday, he had a new date picked out. He said next weekend. Swear. This time Mara didn't prep the dinner. Didn't remind Ryan to vacuum the car. She just sat in her robe on the couch, sipping wine at 2 p.m. like it was normal. A sitcom played on mute. When Ryan asked why she looked tired, she blamed allergies. The second cancellation came via voicemail. Slurred. Something about a friend's birthday, bad directions, next week for sure. Ryan laughed. Not the funny kind, more like an inhale that didn't know where to land. Guess he's bad with calendars, he said. He didn't wait on the porch that third time, but he did wear the shirt Mara said made him look sharp. He paced the house like a man waiting for a verdict. When the clock hit 10:23 p.m., he peeled it off and stuffed it into the laundry bin like it insulted him. The fourth time, no excuse even came. By then, he stopped talking about the guy altogether. But he also stopped doing other things. Skipped practice. Didn't respond to Coach Callahan's texts. He used to spend hours hitting balls into the backyard net. Now the net sagged, wind rattled, untouched. Mara noticed he stopped calling her mom. Just yeah or whatever. He didn't fight. Didn't slam doors. Just went quiet. And that silence spread into the walls, the carpet, The echo in the kitchen. It replaced the creaks Mark used to fix, the background whistle of his old kettle, the way he hummed off-key when doing dishes. The house became quieter than it had ever been, and somehow louder with absence. Mara tried once to bring up Mark. He always showed up, she said gently. Ryan didn't look up from his cereal. Yeah, well, people get tired of showing up. And that was it. They traded the man who built forts in the yard, taught Ryan how to oil a glove, and snuck extra bacon on his plate when Mara wasn't looking, for a name on a birth certificate who couldn't even bother to reply with full sentences. Mark had vanished, yes, but this new ghost they'd invited in? He never even showed up. And slowly, quietly, Ryan began to realize the cruelest truth of all. They didn't lose Mark. They threw him away. It started with the pipes. They burst behind the downstairs bathroom wall one frosty night in January. Water crept into the hallway like it was looking for Mark. Mara stood there in slippers, hands shaking as she fumbled for towels and cursed under her breath. She'd never even known where the shutoff valve was. Mark always handled it. Quietly, before anyone noticed. Ryan didn't come downstairs. He had his headphones on, deep in some online game where loss didn't mean mildew or insurance deductibles. The plumber arrived 2 days later. Charged triple. Said the insulation was amateur hour. Mara signed the check with a look on her face like she'd swallowed gravel. Then came the gas bill. $614.37. Mark used to check the thermostat like it was a sacred ritual. Ryan liked the heat cranked, and Mark would always mutter, "We're not baking bread, kid." Now the heat ran nonstop. Mara never thought to check the settings. Neither did Ryan. By the second week of February, the mortgage bounced. Automatic payment failed. Then the car insurance lapsed. A stack of unpaid envelopes piled on the kitchen counter, red-stamped, urgent, full of terms like final notice and risk of cancellation. Mara started staying up late, staring at spreadsheets like they were ancient puzzles. Her jaw clicked from clenching. The wine bottles under the sink multiplied. Meanwhile, Ryan got detention. Twice. First for shoving a kid in the locker room. Then for skipping sixth period entirely. Mara found out when the school left a voicemail that began with, "We've tried to reach you," and ended with suspension if this pattern continues. When she confronted him, he shrugged. "Why do you care now?" That one sentence knocked the wind out of her more than the mortgage statement. She didn't reply. Couldn't. That night, she called Mark. Twice. His voicemail picked up like always. Calm. Boring. The exact same message he'd had for 5 years. "Hi, this is Mark." Leave it at the beep. She didn't leave a message. She called again the next morning. And that time, she did. "Mark, I know you said not to look for you. I get it. I do. But things are hard." Ryan's struggling. He's angry. "I don't know how to reach him." "You always could. Just, if you could talk to him. That's all. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm just asking for your voice." She ended the call with a whisper, "Please." No response. She emailed. Nothing. She sent a letter, long, handwritten, shaky cursive. She wrote about the pipe, the bills, the bruises she saw on Ryan's knuckles. She told him she missed the quiet competence, the presence. That she'd never realized how much of the house was balanced on his back until he walked away. Still nothing. Mark had vanished like a veteran ghost. Left no forwarding address. No trail. Just an absence that now filled every square inch of their house. His drawer in the bedroom was still half open. She'd left it like that, too afraid to touch the socks inside, as if they might disintegrate. Ryan stopped eating dinner at the table. He microwaved whatever was around and ate standing up, hunched over the counter, chewing like it was a punishment. His eyes never met hers. One night, Mara found him asleep in the laundry room, curled up with Mark's old sweatshirt, the one with the oil stain on the sleeve. She sat down beside him, leaned against the dryer, and didn't say a word. The house that used to hum with quiet laughter and the occasional sarcastic jab now felt like it held its breath every time the front door opened, hoping maybe it was him. But it never was. And the weight of what they'd done settled like dust on every unused chair, every unpaid bill, every echo in the hollow walls. It was a Tuesday when he finally arrived. No fanfare, no heads up, just a dented black Impala pulling up at 8:47 p.m., headlights flickering like a dying firefly. Ryan stood in the window, half in disbelief, half afraid to believe it all. Mara was already in her robe, mascara smudged, wine glass untouched for once. She pulled the door open before he had a chance to knock. "Travis," she said, her voice low and flat. "Hey," he muttered, like they were old friends running into each other at a gas station. He swayed just slightly, not enough for someone to call him out directly, but just enough for her to smell the cheap whiskey clinging to his breath like a second skin. Ryan stepped forward, hesitated. Then, awkwardly, "Hey." Travis turned, blinked at him for a second, then smirked. "Well, damn. Look at you. Tall. You play ball." "Yeah," Ryan said, a flicker of pride in his voice. "Shortstop. Nice. I used to pitch," Travis lied. Mara's lips twitched, but didn't open. They stayed in the living room for about 20 minutes. Travis talked. Fast. Loud. About opportunities and reconnecting, and how fatherhood's a marathon, not a sprint. Every few minutes, he'd rub his eyes and ask for a beer, then change his mind and ask for cash instead. "You got a Motel 6 around here?" he asked, scratching the back of his neck. "Just for a night or two while I get settled. I was in Portland yesterday. Job stuff. Lot going on." Mara handed him $80 in silence. Ryan offered to show him the garage. The batting cage setup Mark had helped him build. Travis nodded, but waved it off. Yeah, maybe tomorrow, kid. Got jet lag. From Portland. Don't be a smartass." Ryan flinched, not from the words, but from the tone. It had teeth. Mark never used that tone. Not once. By 10:15, Travis was gone, back to his car, grumbling about directions and complaining that his phone charger mysteriously stopped working. Ryan went to bed, confused but not defeated. Not yet. Then came the phone call. It was the third night. Travis had shown up again, this time smelling like roadkill and regret. He asked for more money, something about a storage unit in Idaho, unpaid tickets, some overdue child support nonsense he claimed wasn't real. Mara gave him nothing. Later that night, Ryan came downstairs for water. He paused in the hallway when he heard Travis's voice through the barely cracked patio door, back turned, pacing like a man pretending to have a plan. "Yeah, I'm at the house now. No, it's easy. She still feels guilty. I'll squeeze a few hundred more out of her. The kid? Soft. Looks up to me already. Ain't gonna be hard. Nah, he don't ask questions. Dumb as a rock, honestly." Silence. Then laughter. "What, you think I'm staying long? Hell no. Once I get what I need, I'm out." Ryan didn't move. Not for a long time. He stood there with the glass of water shaking in his hand, condensation dripping down his wrist. The next morning, Travis was gone. Left behind a cigarette, but on the porch, a half-eaten box of pizza on the counter, and a smell in the air like moldy sweat and secondhand lies. Ryan didn't ask where he went. Mara didn't offer. She just looked at him across the breakfast table and saw it in his eyes. Something had cracked. "I guess he had stuff to do," Ryan muttered, staring into his cereal. Mara didn't correct him. But that night, she found the batting cage dismantled. Poles unscrewed, net folded, like it had never been used. The only thing left was Mark's old glove, still hanging on the peg by the garage door. Ryan didn't touch it. He walked past it like it didn't exist. Only now it did. It loomed. Because now he knew. He hadn't swapped one dad for another. He'd traded a lighthouse for a matchstick, and it had already burned out. It started small, like most things that end up cutting deep. Mrs. Eldridge, the 80-year-old neighbor with binoculars practically fused to her face, asked Ryan one morning while he was taking out the trash, "Is Mark all right?" "Haven't seen him around." Ryan mumbled something about him traveling, eyes glued to the recycling bin like it could swallow him whole. She nodded, lips pressed tight, then shuffled back inside, curtains twitching behind her as he turned away. The next week, at the grocery store, Mara ran into Dennis from 2 blocks down. Mark used to help him with his sprinkler lines every spring. "Hey," Dennis said, his cart squeaking. "Tell Mark thanks again for that lawn cedar tip. Saved me a fortune last season." "He's still around." Mara hesitated. "He's taking time for himself." Dennis frowned. "Huh. Didn't think he was the me-time type." He wasn't. That was the problem. The whispers grew legs. At church, a woman asked if Ryan was doing okay without his father. Not stepfather. Just father. At the diner, Mark's old breakfast order, black coffee, scrambled eggs, wheat toast no butter, stopped being made. The waitress, Carla, used to have it out for him before he even walked in the door. Mrs. Sarcasm, she told another waitress. Always tip 30%, even when his eggs came out cold. Ryan's baseball coach, Coach Callahan, pulled him aside after practice one evening. What was left of it? Anyway, Ryan hadn't shown up in weeks, and when he did, he moved like a shadow pretending to be a boy. Look, Callahan said, handing him a scuffed ball. I don't know what's going on at home, but I'll tell you this. You were locked in when Mark was in those bleachers. Focused. Disciplined. That man gave a damn. And you knew it. Ryan looked down at the ball. Didn't say anything. Kid, you gotta ask yourself, Callahan continued, who's gonna be proud of this version of you? That hit harder than he expected. The next day, Ryan cut fourth period and got caught vaping behind the maintenance shed with a kid named Luke who once punched a fire alarm, just to see if it worked. Ryan had never even held a cigarette before. But now he didn't care if people saw the spiral, because they were already watching it. His teachers emailed home, grades plummeting, participation non-existent. His English teacher wrote, Ryan stopped turning in assignments entirely. He looks distant. And distant was the right word. Not angry, not rebellious, just not there. Mara found him in the garage one evening, sitting on a folding chair, facing the workbench. He was just staring at it, like something was supposed to appear. Like Mark might suddenly walk in with a drill and a dad joke and make it all make sense again. You okay? She asked. He didn't answer, just kept staring. On the wall above the bench hung a single nail. Empty. The wooden plaque that once held Mark's old coaching whistle used to be there. Mark took it with him, not out of spite, but because no one else had earned the right to keep it. Later that night, Mara overheard two other parents whispering in the stands during a school fundraiser. Shame what happened. He raised that boy like his own. She let him walk away. And for what? A ghost of a man. Mara pretended not to hear. But Ryan heard worse. He heard everyone. At the gas station. At the field. At the hardware store where Mark used to buy mulch by the ton for the backyard projects no one appreciated until they crumbled. And with every glance, every lowered voice, did you hear, the hole inside him grew colder. Because guilt wasn't loud. It was quiet. It settled in your bones. And it stayed. It was almost midnight when the dam finally broke. Ryan came home from school silent, again. Shoes thudded against the wall. Backpack slung across the dining room chair. No words. No eye contact. Just the sound of a spoon clinking against a cereal bowl he didn't want. Mara watched from the kitchen, arms folded, mug untouched. She'd tried asking about his day 3 times this week. No answers. Not even a shrug anymore. Just that hollow-eyed silence. Until she made the mistake of saying, too softly, you know, if you ever want to talk. I am talking. Ryan exploded, flipping the bowl across the table. Milk splattered across unpaid bills and a stack of unopened college brochures Mara had been too afraid to show him. You just don't listen. Ryan, I want him back, he roared, voice cracking somewhere between rage and heartbreak. I want Mark back. I don't care what you said or what you thought was best. He was my dad, not that drunk loser you tried to replace him with. Mara's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her eyes welled up instantly. I didn't try to replace him, Ree. I thought you wanted. I was a kid. I didn't know what the hell I wanted. He was pacing now, hands in his hair. But I knew he'd never leave unless someone pushed him. And you did. You let him walk like he didn't matter. Like he didn't build this entire damn family. Mara collapsed into the nearest chair. Her breath came in gasps, like her lungs had forgotten how to function. You think I don't know that? I wake up every morning and expect to hear him humming while the coffee brews. I still check for his stupid slippers next to the bed. I know what I did. Ryan stood frozen, fists shaking at his sides, eyes wide, scared of what had just come out of him, and terrified of how much of it was true. Then, almost in unison, they reached for their phones. Mara dialed first. The speaker rang once, twice. You've reached Mark. Leave a message. She hung up, shaking, hands damp. Ryan grabbed his phone, stared at the contact labeled Just Dad, thumb hovering. He called. Voicemail. He left a message. Mark, it's me. I want to talk. Please. Then another. Then Mara left one. Then another from Ryan. Then 3 more. One was just breathing. One was just sobbing. By 2 a.m., they'd left 17 voicemails between them. Pleas, apologies, begging, confessions neither of them had made even to themselves before tonight. "Mark, I didn't mean it," Ryan said in the 6th. "When I asked about him, about my bio dad, it wasn't because I didn't love you. I was confused and dumb, and now I can't breathe right without you here." Mara's 9th was a whisper through tears. "You were right. About everything. The house is falling apart. The kid is falling apart. And I am too. I was just too proud to say it until now." They sat side by side on the floor afterward, backs against the kitchen cabinets, feet numb, faces red. The clock ticked. The silence was deafening. Then the phone buzzed. Both of them jolted upright. A text, but not from Mark. Spam. "Congratulations. You've been pre-approved for a..." Mara dropped the phone. Ryan curled up, forehead on his knees. The voicemail line had become a graveyard for apologies too late. Because Mark wasn't ignoring them. He had simply evolved beyond them. And once a man like that moves on, he doesn't look back. By early spring, the deck was done. Mark had rebuilt it from the foundation up. New planks, sanded smooth, treated with cedar oil he'd bartered from the hardware store owner for fixing a busted backup generator. Every nail sunk into that what felt like a quiet punctuation mark at the end of an old sentence. He'd ripped out the rotted pieces himself. No gloves, just hands, sweat, and resolve. The trout smoking came next. He'd never done it before. Just something he read about in an old outdoor manual he found tucked behind a broken cabinet. Took him 3 tries to get it right. The first batch came out tasting like rubber tires. The second turned into mush. But the third? The third was perfect, smoky, delicate, flaky, seasoned just enough to make him wonder why the hell he hadn't started doing this 30 years ago. He ate it with black coffee and scrambled eggs each morning. Quiet, deliberate, like a ritual. And the sketchbook, God, the sketchbook. He used to draw years ago, back before life got busy with baseball practices and clogged gutters, and "Can you pick up almond milk on your way home?" requests. Now, every night by the fire, he filled page after page. Trees, mountains, a fox he saw once that stared at him like it knew his entire story. One page had a silhouette of a boy holding a bat, back turned, staring up at stadium lights. He didn't sign that one. Most evenings he'd wander into town, down to a small diner called Rosie's, named after the original owner's dog, not the owner herself, who insisted on being called Mrs. J and never smiled unless you made her laugh without trying. But Kendra, the new waitress, 20 years his junior with a tattoo of a paper crane on her wrist and a warm way of saying "Mark" like she'd known it all her life. She talked to him like he wasn't half a ghost. "You always sit in the same booth," she said once, topping off his coffee. "I like routine." "You like hiding," she replied, smirking. He smiled at that. First real smile in months. It creased his face in a way that reminded him he was still alive. She didn't ask about his past. She didn't need to. The lines around his eyes told enough of the story. And he didn't volunteer much, just that he was retired, had some free time, and was learning to do things slower. One morning, just after sunrise, he sat on the new deck with a mug of hot coffee, wrapped in an old hoodie, listening to the wind move through the pine. His phone, silent all night, buzzed once. Then again. He didn't look. He didn't need to. By now, the call display was muscle memory. Mara. Ryan. Home. He let it vibrate until it stopped. Then turned the phone off completely, set it upside down on the table, and went back to sketching a trout mid-leap from water. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. It was earned. Because peace isn't always soft. Sometimes it's forged, like steel. Sometimes it's what happens when you stop letting people shape you like clay. And for the first time in years, Mark wasn't performing. He wasn't proving. He was just being. And while the world he left behind crumbled under the weight of regret, he built a new one from the ashes. Alone. Solid. Untouched. The letter came folded in thirds, sealed in a plain white envelope, addressed in shaky, uncertain block letters. Mark H. P.O. Box 72. Spruce Hollow, CO. It sat in the mailbox for 3 days before Mark picked it up. He only checked the box when he needed to, usually once a week. Bills mostly. Catalogs he never ordered. A few ads from the local lumberyard. But this one stood out. No return address. No stamp either. It had been hand-delivered. Small-town postmaster must have recognized the name and tossed it in the box out of courtesy. Everyone knew everyone up here. Everyone also knew better than to ask Mark questions. He held the envelope for a long time before opening it. Something about the pressure of the paper, the way the ink bled just slightly in places, already told him what it was. Inside, one page, torn from a school notebook. Faint blue lines. The handwriting wasn't perfect, slanted, some words pressed down too hard, but he'd have known it anywhere. Mark, you were always my father. I don't know why I didn't see it before. Maybe I did. Maybe I just didn't want it to be true because it hurt too much knowing I failed you. I was stupid. I let the wrong man in and pushed the right one out. You never raised your voice. You never left until I gave you a reason to. I know it's probably too late, but I had to say it. Please come home. Ryan. Mark read it once. Then again. Then slowly, deliberately, a third time. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. He didn't mutter anything about forgiveness or second chances. He just sat in the wooden chair by the fireplace, letter resting in one hand, the other absently stroking the bark-smooth armrest he'd carved months ago. Outside, the wind was soft, the kind of evening hush that made pine needles hum. He looked toward the window, the same one he always stared through during storms. Snow still clung to the ridge beyond the creek. A deer grazed quietly at the edge of the trees, unaware, or maybe uncaring, that it was being watched. After a long moment, Mark leaned forward and fed the letter to the fire. It caught quickly, curling at the corners like it was relieved to disappear. He watched the flames fold the words into ash. The sentence, "Please come home," burned last, the ink crackling into dust. He stood, stretched his back, and poured himself a mug of strong black coffee. Not whiskey, not wine. Coffee, ground that morning. Hot, bitter, grounding. Then he stepped outside, sat on the rebuilt deck, and watched the stars come out, one by one, until the sky felt full again. Because some things don't get fixed. Some doors, once closed, don't creak back open. Some fathers stop chasing the echo of their name. And that night, Ryan's apology didn't fall on deaf ears. It fell on a man who had already forgiven, but moved on anyway. The last time Mara had been in that grocery store with Mark, he'd made a scene in the produce section. Nothing dramatic, just that low-level kind of scene only someone who knew him could detect. A quiet debate with the butcher about why no one in Oregon seemed to understand how to properly trim a rack of lamb. She'd laughed then, told him to stop acting like a New Yorker. He replied, "I'm not acting." Now, 6 months later, she stood frozen in aisle 4 with Ryan beside her, staring at the man who used to argue about lamb fat like it mattered. Mark. He looked different. Not younger. Not older. Just clearer. Like whatever weight had once pressed between his shoulders had lifted and evaporated into the cold Colorado air he now called home. He wore a flannel shirt tucked in too neatly, jeans without a crease, boots that actually looked worn for once. His cart had a few practical things: canned beans, almonds, a newspaper, a thermos. No distractions. No junk. No chaos. Mara spotted him first. The breath left her lungs so fast, she almost dropped the carton of eggs in her hand. Ryan, eyes buried in his phone, didn't see him until he looked up at her reaction. Then his phone slipped from his grip. Mark saw them. That much was certain. He glanced up. No flicker of surprise. Just a brief pause, like spotting a vaguely familiar painting you no longer liked. He nodded. Polite. Civil. Distant. And then, he turned and walked past them. No words. No hand on Ryan's shoulder. No clenched jaw. No, I told you so. Just silence. Ryan's lips parted, and something fragile cracked in his chest. Dad. It came out like a ghost of a name. A word wrapped in guilt and time, and the kind of love that shows up far too late. Mark didn't stop. Didn't turn. Just kept walking. The wheels of his cart squeaked once, then faded into the hum of the fluorescent lights above aisle 5. Bulk grains and quiet exits. Ryan stood there, motionless, lips trembling. That one word, Dad, still floating somewhere in the refrigerated air. Mara reached for him, hesitated, then lowered her hand. Nothing she could say would fill that gap. Nothing could glue back what they'd shattered. They checked out in silence. Outside, in the parking lot, the sun was low. Everything glowed gold, but nothing felt warm. As they loaded their bags into the trunk, Ryan finally spoke. "He's never coming back, is he?" Mara didn't lie. "No." And that was it. Mark returned to Colorado later that afternoon. Paperwork filed. Signatures made. The house, his house, officially transferred, wiped clean from his name. He didn't drive by it. Didn't check the mailbox. Didn't even glance at the street sign. Just did what he came to do. And vanished again. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. But because forgetting is its own form of justice. And for Mara and Ryan, there would be no grand confrontation, no final blow-up, no dramatic closure. Just a man with steady hands and no more questions. A silence so heavy, it said everything.